let's talk about what happened at the weekend, because lots of focus, of course, today and for the next couple of days on Keir Starmer and on the Labour Party up in Liverpool at conference. This is what he said to Lauren Kuenssberg yesterday when he was talking about Reform's migrant policy.
Well, I do think that it's a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
And do you think that Reform UK is trying to appeal to racists?
No, I think that there are plenty of people who either vote Reform or are thinking of voting Reform who are frustrated. They had 14 years of failure under the Conservatives. They want us to change things. They may have voted Labour a year ago, and they want the change to come more quickly.
So Shamala Mahmood, right, shortly after he gave that interview, basically said that they're going to copy Reform's policy on indefinite leave to remain. Migrants will have to wait 10 years rather than the current 5 before being able to claim indefinite leave to remain, unless they are making a particular significant contribution to society. Also, they're going to be given a new point system. If they're not good citizens, they're not going to be admitted. Does he think that's racist? Yeah. You know, I mean, he's basically calling every single Reform voter a racist, and that's what it says on the front page of the Mail. It says, Nigel Farage says, worried about immigration, Starmer says you're a racist.
Yeah, and that is a good headline. This was such an own goal, Mike. I mean, really, you are telling... I mean, look at the polling. Reform would be on course to win a massive majority. Starmer is absolutely the most unpopular leader ever.
He is. That was breaking news yesterday,
literally, in 50 years, in nearly 50 years, I think he's got the lowest approval rating of all time. The Chancellor is the most unpopular Chancellor
ever. That's just his own party.
That's just his own party. And he's called the British population racist. If you are worried about immigration, that's effectively what he's saying. This is going to anger... I mean, he couldn't have done worse. And then, as you say, the weird contradictions and the lack of clarity, it shows they don't actually have a policy.
No.
From his own Home Secretary, who is saying, the thing that worries me about what Shamala Mahmood is saying is she's saying, unless you're making a significant contribution to your community.
Right.
So she's sort of skating around this idea of, you know, giving back to your community. No, that's not what people want. It's not that you go out and you do a local bit of gardening, you know, in your local
or
whatever.
work for a local charity.
Well, that's what they'll
because
probably...
that's what they think work is.
Yeah.
People who run the Labour government think that work has something to do with public sector and service. They don't think it's got anything to do with generating money or actually making a living. They think it's doing something nice, you know.
But that'll be their get-out clause. That will be their get-out clause. They won't get rid of people. They will just say, oh, you can go and do a bit of community service.
One Labour source says that this to the Mail, I know he's talking about Farage and this horrible divisive policy, but there is a danger that people with legitimate concerns hear it and just think he's calling them racist. I'm not sure that is really the best way to win people back from Reform.
It's really not the best way. And Rosie Duffield on Times Radio was saying dozens of Labour MPs are absolutely disgusted at the direction of the party under Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, more than half of them don't want him to be leader. That's his own party.
Really embarrassed. And you know, when you see him arriving at conference, he's not surrounded by his MPs.
Yeah.
They are going to be absolutely terrified.
Oh, of course.
They're terrified about May. It's going to be a bloodbath.
It will be.
Local elections for them.
It will be absolutely horrendous.
How can they defend this stuff? And then you have Andy Burnham, who's meant to be on, well, obviously not on side, saying, you know, when there's a climate of fear, you know, people can't even defend these policies. You can't even disagree because...
Because he punishes you. Because he runs the place like a Stalinist. I mean, that's what he does. Now, here's what Shamala Mahmood said. Foreign nationals who want to settle in Britain permanently will need a clean criminal record. Well, that's good.
Well done.
So what about the 125 that came on a small boat, or rather a large boat, on the weekend, on Saturday? How do you know if they have a criminal record or not?
What about the children and the teenager who died in the Channel? That's blood on their hands.
More or less trampled to death.
Well, yeah,
right,
they didn't stop it.
And here's what she says. Those who give back to the local communities, you were saying, will be able to win preferential treatment. But what they don't say is what happens if you commit a crime. Do you get kicked out? What happens if it turns out you've committed a crime somewhere else before you come in? Do you get kicked out? Do you get refused entry? There's no coherence to any of their policies, right? Anyone seeking indefinite leave to remain in Britain should have a spotless criminal record, she says. Well, how do you know, looking at the people coming, who they are, what sort of criminal record they've got, what they've been doing, who they've been raping or murdering or stabbing? You don't know anything.
And what about, are we still going to pay them their £2,000 to leave if they don't have a spotless criminal record?
Well, your guess is as good as mine.
At the moment, we don't have any more space. We don't have any more slack at all in our public services. It's hard enough to get an appointment without the BMA saying,
I mean, the doctors are brilliant. This is fantastic. This is typical. This shows you exactly what the problem is with the NHS in this country, right? The British Medical Association says it will take industrial action if the government goes ahead with plans to improve access to online booking. So if you start helping the people of this country
to actually get
a doctor's appointment, they're going to go on strike.
How outrageous to get a doctor's appointment.
I mean, have they never heard of the Hippocratic Oath, which says first do no harm? And
Wes Streeting said it's ridiculous that you can get a hairdresser's appointment online, but you can't get a doctor's appointment. And this is what the NHS is up against. They want to kind of go slow. You know what? People want appointments.
Right.
As if it's not hard enough.
Right. It's like a joke. The BMA says the moves are being introduced without sufficient safeguards to stop practices being overwhelmed by patients. I talk to people every day, right, who tell me stories about their experience with the NHS. Yeah. Not one person that's ever told me, I walked into the NHS waiting room and it was really busy. What they do tell me is I walked into the NHS waiting room and there was nobody in there.
Exactly.
Because there's never anybody in there.
There's never anybody in there, and they are making it harder and harder to get appointments.
Yeah.
You know, you have to battle your way through the receptionist if they even answer the phone, who will then send you a link where you have to then upload photographs, and then 3 days later you get a phone call from someone asking you to verify your identity. I mean, the whole thing has become a dystopian. You know, the NHS has become about the staff. I was in a big London hospital the other day. I was surrounded by posters telling me to treat their staff with respect, and I just thought, it's since COVID. I thought, when did the NHS stop being about the patients?
It was during COVID, and that's when I started saying, actually, they'd rather they didn't have any patients. They'd rather you just didn't bother them. You know, it's much better if you just don't go to hospital.
Just don't go in.
And I always quote my favourite sign that was outside, and I think it was somewhere like Rugby, outside. Somebody sent it in. It was a GP surgery in Rugby, and the sign outside says, "Please do not enter if you are ill." That's what it actually said. And I'm going, but it's the NHS. You're only going there if you're bleeding ill. Let's talk to Zia Yusuf, who's right here with us. He is, of course, head of Doge at Reform UK. Zia, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
This Labour government goes from bad to worse. I couldn't quite believe my ears yesterday when Starmer gave his interview to Laura Kuenssberg. First of all, calling Reform's policies racist, and then watching as his own Home Secretary pretty much copied all of it and said it wasn't racist at all. Then he turns out to have bought himself a donkey field for 20,000 quid, made £300,000 profit, and not paid any tax on it. What's going on?
Well, look, I think that's an apt summary. Look, the British people, Mike, are sick and tired of having their legitimate concerns about immigration being dismissed, being belittled, of being patronised, and ultimately being smeared as racist. And I tweeted out yesterday that smearing people who raise legitimate concerns about immigration as racist is the fresh new thinking that Keir Starmer has become famous for. And that is why, by the way, he is the most unpopular Prime Minister, according to a poll that came out this week, on record. And when he made that statement, when he accused Reform of being racist, when he accused people who support the idea that migrants must pay their way and not commit crime in this country as being racist, look, he wasn't speaking to the voters. He was speaking to his own members at the conference, because there was a Survation poll this week where 53%, the majority of Labour members, want him to resign. They want him to resign. So look, Reform are the only party who are serious about saying British people deserve a secure border, who will uphold immigration law. And what we announced in terms of our ILR policy is very simple. We accept migrants in this country to pay their way, speak English, and not commit crime. The fact that that has driven this hysterical meltdown throughout the establishment, not just the government and Keir Starmer, but also a lot of the mainstream media, is just because they can feel their power finally starting to crumble around them, because the British people are waking up and they are no longer willing to fund a food bank for the world.
Exactly right. But of course, then you read the front page of the Times today, which it says immigrants face a good citizen test to stay in the UK. Foreign citizens will have to volunteer in their community, have a spotless criminal record, speak English to a high standard, and be a net contributor to the economy to qualify for permanent settlement. Sorry, that sounds exactly like what you just said.
Does sound familiar. Like I've heard that kind of a policy very recently. I can't think where I heard it, but this is the craziness of the situation. Ultimately, there are some people at Number 10 behind the scenes who do understand where the British people are on these issues, but the metropolitan elite who ultimately make the decisions and run the party, of which Keir Starmer is the shining, bright example, they look down on these views. They look down and sneer down the end of their noses at British people, ordinary people who say, look, those people listening to this program right now and on their way to work who think, I'm struggling to put food on my own kids' table. Why am I being forced to fund tens of billions and soon hundreds of billions of pounds in welfare payments for foreign nationals? It's unacceptable. And again, it is that craziness. It is this totally inept, totally detached perspective that this Labour government has, not unlike the Tories. Why Keir Starmer's popularity? He is the most unpopular Prime Minister already on record, and why, frankly, it's unlikely that he's going to last much longer in that post.
Yeah, and he's sort of flailing around now like a madman in a kind of the middle of an asylum. You know, they just take the straitjacket off and they're just kind of going, I know, let's build 12 new towns. I don't know, somewhere, there's one in Enfield there, there's somewhere, you know, let's talk to the housing secretary. He doesn't know how many houses they've built. He doesn't know where the money's coming from. He doesn't know when they're going to put spades in the ground. Then we've got Starmer saying he's not sure if they're going to put up VAT or not. They don't really know. They're going to give jobs to 18 to 20. I mean, it's literally like a drunk handing out money from his pocket.
Yeah, and this is exactly the same behaviour that Rishi Sunak exhibited during the general election, if you remember.
Yeah.
He said, national service over here, completely ill thought out, took everyone surprised, or this random policy. This is what happens when you have politicians who don't stand for anything, who don't believe in anything, are unwilling to listen to what the British people actually want. I think your point about the housing minister, though, was fascinating, because we've now, for some time at Reform, been saying that the quality and calibre of cabinet minister the British people have been subjected to for the last few decades has been nothing short of atrocious. And that is why we're saying half of our cabinet around Nigel, if the British people choose to deliver the result of the ballot box where Reform have a majority and Nigel's the Prime Minister, half will be MPs, half won't be MPs. And whether they're MPs or not, they will be the brightest and best people in the country. And the idea that a housing secretary does not know how many houses have been built on his watch is one of the most unfathomable things to anybody who has ever been involved in or run a serious organization. And it is no surprise, therefore, that people listening to this program and watching it find it so difficult to even be able to rent a home. Just to be able to rent a home now is becoming a pipe dream for many people, let alone buy one. A third of our young adults, 19 to 32, now live with their parents. That is a record high because they cannot afford to even rent a home. We have a massive shortage, and we're certainly not going to fix that with the kind of clownish talent that we currently see in the cabinet that was on full display yesterday.
I know. And what did you make of this business of the donkey field? I mean, we're making fun of it this morning because it is kind of comical, but at the same time, incredibly hard to believe that a highly paid lawyer who himself admitted that he had £20,000 to lie around when the average salary was 15, he makes a £300,000 profit. He doesn't pay any tax on it, as far as we're aware, either capital gains or inheritance tax. And it turns out that he says he didn't put it into a trust. Every single tax expert says that's exactly what he did. He couldn't have done it any other way.
But Mike, you've got to remember who we're talking about here. We're talking about a man, as we learnt very shortly after he won the general election on the basis that he was going to be better than the Tories. This is a man who allowed a wealthy donor to buy his spectacles for him.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people listening to this program or watching this program would allow a wealthy donor to buy their designer spectacles for them? Allow the donor to buy him expensive designer clothes, buy his partner expensive designer clothes. This is a man who clearly is the metropolitan elite, who does not think that the rules apply to him. And by the way, what makes this even worse is that pretty much the only reason he won the election was on the basis of all the sleaze, of all the scandals from the Tories. And the only promise really that you could reasonably claim that he made in a meaningful way is that we were going to be better than that. And what he's ended up being is at least as bad, if not even worse. And look, we don't know all of the facts yet. And I think now what he's created is a much bigger, broader investigation from the media and from other people about what actually went on, whether that was a trust or not. Smart tax people on X, I've been reading what they've been saying, very well qualified tax people have been saying it looks like a trust, it smells like a trust. Keir Starmer saying it isn't a trust. He may well have opened up a can of worms for himself. Let's see.
I think so. And finally this morning, let me just get Reform's view officially. I mean, Nigel Farage quoted this morning as saying that Keir Starmer's claim that the Reform policy is racist is an insult to the millions of British people who just want the British government to get a grip on immigration. You know, is Nigel likely to say more on that today, do you think?
Well, we're going to keep saying the same thing. Reform will secure our borders. Reform will uphold immigration law. Reform believe British people, like all countries, deserve sovereignty over their nation, and that British people and their interests must come first. The fact that our policy, where we said we expect migrants in this country to pay their way, i.e. be a net contributor to the economy, to speak English and not commit crime, has elicited this insane, borderline psychotic, hysterical meltdown, speaks to the fact that we have lived through decades now of people running this country who lie to the electorate time and time again. Remember, British people voted time and again, whether it was Brexit, whether it was 4 consecutive Tory manifestos to cut immigration. And what happened? They got far more immigration. We are saying we're going to sort that out. We're going to be serious about immigration policy. And the only thing Labour have left, sadly, like much of the metropolitan elite, is to sneer at people who have those concerns and call them racist. Well, you know what? It simply won't work anymore.
Very good morning to you.
Good morning, although I wouldn't say it's one of the best mornings I've had because I'm at Labour conference.
Yeah, I know, but at least there's some comedy value, I'm assuming. I mean, they all seem to be fighting like rats in a sack. You've got Andy what's his face, saying that there's a culture of fear. Andy Burnham, the Manchester mayor, saying people aren't allowed to say what they think. They're not allowed to differ from the policies of the government. You know, otherwise they get the whip taken away. I mean, he obviously is like the spectre at the feast here, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I like the idea of Keir Starmer as a kind of Stalinist apparatchik, you know, whipping people down for trying to speak their mind, I think the reality is that Andy Burnham has been very much on manoeuvres. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, you know, this is a government that's been in power for 14 months, but it's acting like the Tories did after 14 years in power. You know, just the degree of kind of acrimonious infighting is almost unbelievable. It's difficult to get behind how much people hate other people within their own party who seem to have policies that are almost indistinguishable from each other. They're all at each other's throats, and I think it's because they know how unpopular they've become in the wider country, and Keir Starmer is a bit of a lightning rod for that frustration.
Right. I mean, he does seem to be uniting people behind hatred of him. You know, everybody seems to hate Keir Starmer, no matter what side of the political divide they're on.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I was walking in yesterday about midday, and there was a massive protest happening outside the conference. And, you know, I can't repeat what was said on some of the signs because they were a little bit strongly worded. But I think it's safe to say that they weren't very happy with Keir Starmer. You know, and that's just people from the outside who are angry about digital ID, angry about what he's done with the family farm tax. But even within the conference, you know, you can see the rumblings from the people still in the left of the party, or the Burnham wing, if you want to call them that, who are very, very frustrated at just how unpopular this government has become so quickly.
Yeah, and also, you know, the ridiculousness yesterday of Keir Starmer's interview with Laura Kuenssberg, where he basically called Reform voters racist, even though he says he didn't. You know, he certainly called Reform's policies racist and immoral, only to then be seen by his own Home Secretary later on in the afternoon adopting some of those same policies.
Yeah, I mean, Shabana Mahmood is going to be giving a speech today on immigration, and we're expecting her to basically lift almost in its entirety Reform's ILR plans. Again, she's just been shuffled into this role. I think she's been in this role for about 3 weeks now. How is she already being contradicted by her Prime Minister, who is supposed to be a close ally of hers? You know, if he's coming out and saying that Reform voters are extremist, or, you know, Farage is flirting with some kind of racist idea about immigration policy, you can't then have your Home Secretary address the party hall and say, oh, well, about that racist extremist, he's got some really good ideas on border control.
I know, and that seems to be the thing, that they don't have a way of coordinating their thoughts. They don't seem to have a way. You know, Steve Reid yesterday made a complete fool of himself, unable to say how many houses that he had built as the housing secretary, unable to say where these new towns are going to be, you know, apart from some sort of loose suggestion that, oh, there's one near Enfield, another one up near Leeds somewhere, oh, you know, we're going to build 1.5 million. He doesn't have the wherewithal, he doesn't have the money, he doesn't have the raw materials, doesn't even have the builders. And yet they're just kind of flailing around saying this stuff as if it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw he was wearing that ridiculous bucket hat on stage.
Yeah.
I actually managed to get a version of that bucket hat. It was very, very cheaply made, and if that doesn't exactly bode well for these new towns that Labour is going to be making if they can't even make a nice bucket hat. But yeah, again, it seems to be, we're at that stage in the government where ministers seem to be operating almost in their own domains. There's no top-down direction from number 10, which is, I think, the reason why someone like Burnham is allowed to talk about this kind of rebellious language language about getting rid of the Prime Minister.
And do you think part of that problem is that Morgan McSweeney's grip on the cabinet has kind of loosened because of all the scandals surrounding his own situation with his electoral commission investigation, which they don't really want to do, and that he's obviously trying to shut down. But the fact that Morgan McSweeney can no longer control probably the cabinet, and certainly not the rest of the party, is having an effect on its effectiveness, if you like.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, I think we've seen his own ally, you know, who, aside from Keir Starmer, Shabana Mahmood, she's been really sidelined. You know, that is very much one of his protégés. They've known each other for years and years now. She's quite blue Labour inflected, which is why the government kind of presented her as she's going to be the one that gets tough on immigration. But this soft left faction absolutely despises him. And I think, you know, again, they've been briefing very hard against him. They've seen an area of weakness because of that. I think it was £734,000 of money in slightly dodgy donations that helped get Starmer into the position of Prime Minister in the first place. And they're going on the attack because they just don't think he's doing a very good job of directing the ideological direction of the Labour Party.
No, he's absolutely not. And then this latest kind of, I mean, it just goes from bad to worse in terms of comedy value. You know, this idea about the field full of donkeys that he got for his parents. Just have a look at what he said, because I think his face at the end of this shows he's terrified. This is how he bought the field.
I was a lawyer, I had quite a lot of money. I bought a field for £20,000 at the back of their house, and I said, here's your field, it's yours for as long as you may live, you can put your donkeys in it.
That's because
I didn't create the trust, I simply bought a field, and I said to Mum and Dad, this is for you.
Okay.
It was, and also, by the way, Laura, it was £20,000. We're not looking at a vast estate with great tax.
It's a lot of money to many people, and it's sold it many years later for more than
a lot of money, but
£200,000.
the idea of setting up some complicated trust for a £20,000 agricultural field, which then housed 4 donkeys for all the time my mum and dad. It was my mum. She was able. They had a little outhouse at the edge of the field, and she was able, in the end, to see the donkeys. And my dad built a little sort of porchway so he could wheel the wheelchair out so she could touch the donkeys. That's what it was for, and I gave it to them. I had enough money at the time because I was a lawyer. It was a gift to my mum and dad.
And that's now on the record. You did not put it in trust, and that's not been on the record before, and that is now on the record.
And his face when she says that kind of shows you what he's worried about. He says it was a gift to his mum and dad. It wasn't a gift because he didn't declare it as a gift, because if he had, it would have been subject to inheritance tax very possibly later when he made 300,000 quid. He kept it, and it was a loan, which is basically an implied trust. And everybody who knows anything about these things, and I've been speaking to them this morning, have told me that, right? He also then says, you know, that it was something that he wanted to do for his parents because 20,000 wasn't very much money. In 1996, £20,000 was more than the average salary of an average worker in this country.
I mean, it must have been a massive field. I can't kind of imagine how many donkeys there must have actually been on this field. 4 seems quite few.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole story, kind of Starmer's like, you know, he's exasperated. Like, why are you even bothering to ask me about this donkey field I bought for my parents? It's classic Labour. It's the same thing that Angela Rayner did. Yeah. You know, if you're going to propose rules for the rest of the country, you better be Mr. Squeaky Clean. Yeah. You would be acting exactly to the letter of the law. What you can't do is when a story does come out that raises questions about your propriety, you know, kind of throw your arms up in the air and go, why are you asking me this question? I just did a nice thing for my parents. Right. You know, that is not a good justification.
No, and it gives away the fact that he's been a very wealthy man. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it's a hypocrisy of it, of asking everybody else not to avoid paying tax when he's clearly been avoiding paying tax.
Yeah, and also coming after Farage, you know, a couple of weeks ago for him apparently, you know, buying this house in his constituency and trying to raise concerns over that. Again, it's like, don't throw stones if you're living in a glass house. You don't throw stones across your donkey field. And so, yes, of course he's going to be mocked for this. Of course people are going to be asking him questions about this. It is quite a funny story.
It's a hilarious story.
Just the donkey element alone is worth talking about.
Well, this is why we're doing it. We've been playing donkey noises all morning. You know, people are saying to me, you know, what happened to the donkeys when he sold the field? You know, and the fact that he sold it in 2022 and made such a massive profit, you know, he must have sold it for some kind of redevelopment scheme, you would imagine, because you can't get that kind of money from just selling it as arable farming land. And so I think there's a lot more to come out on this one.
Yes, exactly. And again, it's just number 10 is having more stories starting to kind of leak out. I mean, I guess we could have seen the direction of the government from the very beginning with the Lord Ali, cash for dressing scandal at the beginning. They presented themselves as being not like the Tories, there's no sleaze, we're above it all. And lo and behold, they're not.
I've spoken to a few tax lawyers who have explained to me what this kind of implied trust business is. Because when Keir Starmer yesterday or Sunday said to Laura Kuenssberg, I didn't create a trust in order to make this happen, he was sort of right in a way, but in a way he was also wrong, because I'm told that when you do what he did, that kind of creates a trust all of its own, kind of automatically.
Yes, I mean, it completely depends on what the intentions of the parties are. If, for example, I give you something, it's a gift, and therefore it's yours. If I lend you something, if I let you borrow my car for a couple of weeks, it's mine. I've let you borrow it. But in law, if you split the legal title and what we call the beneficial interest, i.e. the right to use it in an unfettered way, then that creates a trust, whether you like it or not, to be honest.
Yes, and that's the point. So he's being slightly disingenuous when he says, I didn't create a trust, because he must know, as a lawyer, precisely what he did. He must know that there was a reason why he didn't gift it to his parents, and he must know why there was a reason, instead of gifting it to them, he loaned it to them. And he must know also, presumably, the ramifications of that.
Well, I mean, most lawyers, or most of us, will have learnt about this in law school, and bar school in Keir's case. As to exactly what the position was, you'd have to go into the individual facts of what he had discussed with his parents and what was agreed in order to tell whether a trust had been created or not.
Right.
Just because a trust has been created, then you go on to look at the type of trust it is and the tax rules, and then apply it to see whether, for example, inheritance tax, capital gains tax, etc., applies to whatever arrangement's been put in place.
Right. Because what we were told was, if he had given it to his parents, or he had gifted it to his father, for example, it would have made his father's estate, which ended up being worth about 300 and something thousand, worth double that. It would have been worth 600 and something thousand, which would have then effectively made him liable for, in some form, an inheritance tax hit. But yeah, a lot of people have asked me, did he pay capital gains tax on it? And I don't know the answer to that. And what would be the rule on that?
Well, from what I've read, he did pay capital gains tax on it when he disposed of it. In respect of the inheritance tax situation, obviously it's very complicated, because you can get inheritance tax banding passed from a spouse to another spouse, from a husband to a wife, for example, which can double your band, i.e. the amount that you don't pay. So that is something that is really quite complicated, and which obviously each situation you'd have to look at the rest of the estate, see what it's valued at, etc.
Yes. And, I've got nothing against people, putting things into trust. I've got nothing against people protecting their assets from paying tax, as long as it's lawful. I just think that a lot of people were slightly shocked that, this government, which talks a lot about people who avoid tax being bad people, even though they're doing it legally, that they're also doing it.
Well, yes. I mean, this government, in common with other governments, has really cracked down on what they see as tax avoidance, effectively, as opposed to tax evasion.
Yeah.
But the Labour government has been at pains to try to close any loopholes on tax avoidance, as far as I've seen. And if this is a tax avoidance measure, then it could be seen as somewhat hypocritical.
Well, quite. I mean, I don't get to talk to very many cabinet ministers. They don't like coming on my show, but I can be for sure the next time I get one on, I'm going to say, is there any trust you want to tell us about? Because obviously we know about the Angela Rayner story and that trust, which was, perhaps slightly interesting in the way that she removed money from it in order to buy another place in Hove. And here we've now got the Prime Minister, who appears to have taken advantage of a trust-type situation.
Perhaps, yes.
It is fascinating. So, I mean, the bottom line, I suppose, is whether people are going to pursue this. I mean, we are, but obviously he spent many, many weeks ignoring questions from the Sunday Times, suddenly said on the BBC this. Let's have a look.
I was a lawyer, I had quite a lot of money, I bought a field for £20,000 at the back of their house, and I said, here's your field, it's yours for as long as you may live, you could put your donkeys in it.
That's because
I didn't create the trust. I simply bought a field and I said to Mum and Dad, this is for you.
Okay.
It was, and also, by the way, Laura, it was £20,000. We're not looking at a vast estate with great tax.
It's a lot of money to many people, and you sold it many years later for more than
It is a lot of money, but
£200,000.
the idea of setting up some complicated trust for a £20,000 agricultural field, which then housed 4 donkeys for all the time my mum and dad. It was my mum. She was able, where they had a little outhouse at the edge of the field, and she was able, in the end, to see the donkeys. And my dad built a little sort of porchway so he could wheel the wheelchair out so she could touch the donkeys. That's what it was for, and I gave it to them. I had enough money at the time because I was a lawyer. It was a gift to my mum and dad.
And that's now on the record. You did not put it in trust, and that's not been on the record before, and that is now on the record.
Do you know, I find, and I mean, I know I'm sort of straying into areas that you may not wish to go into here, Quentin, but I find his manner quite strange, you know? He says it was a gift to my mum and dad. Now, being a lawyer, he knows it wasn't a gift, because had it been a gift, it would have been a gift that was gifted, so that it would have been then theirs, right, as you explained earlier. So why do you think he's so kind of inaccurate in the way that he refers to things?
You know, the difficulty for me in that is that it seems at one point at the beginning he says, well, it's mine and I let them use it, which might imply loan. At the end he says gift, but then in the middle his language is more akin to a trust. I bought it, but they could use it for the rest of their lives, which implies a split of beneficial and legal interests. So from a lawyer's point of view, I'm none the wiser as a result of that interview.
Right. And that's the problem, because, you know, as a lawyer, and I've known plenty of lawyers in my life, sometimes I've had to employ them for one thing or another, you know, they tend to be fairly exact. I mean, I'm speaking to you and you're being pretty exact with your words. You know what you're saying, you know what you mean, you realise what you're describing could be misconstrued if you say it the wrong way. He doesn't seem to have that kind of, you know, safety valve as a lawyer. He seems to say things which are clearly not perhaps correct.
I suppose there's a difference between acting as a politician and acting as a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, people tell me, and I don't know what you know of your fellows in the business, but people tell me that when he was in charge of the CPS, he was more of an administrator than he was a litigator. He didn't actually do much litigating in court, and I've spoken to a couple of politicians who actually did work for him at the time as barristers, and he would instruct them, and they would go and take the cases on actually in the courts themselves, and he would sort of sit behind a desk and allocate those cases rather than be, you know, somebody who would actually get up and argue cases.
Well, that's right. In his position, he wouldn't be able to, the sheer workload that he had, he wouldn't be able to go and litigate many cases just because of the sheer amount of things on his desk. But as I understood, I've never myself been in a case with Sir Keir, but his reputation at the bar was one of being an excellent silk and somebody who was very clear and concise, particularly in front of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court or House of Lords. He was known to be talented.
Was he? Well, I mean, I find that quite hard to believe, to be honest, because the one thing he doesn't appear to be, in my estimation anyway, is particularly in public speaking, talented. He's wooden, isn't he? I mean, most lawyers I know are pretty good at speaking publicly. They're pretty good at making arguments and making cases. He doesn't seem to be good at any of that.
Well, Mike, you know, the difference between general public speaking and making focused submissions as a lawyer is quite great. I've been to many lawyers' weddings, for example, where the speeches by people who are very talented barristers haven't been very good at all. It's one of those things where the job is quite different to perhaps general public speaking.
Yes. No, I get that. I mean, I've seen both parts of it, you know, but I just don't know. It just doesn't strike me as a very bright spark in the box, really. But there we are. I'll take your word for it, Quentin. Isn't it funny how Nigel Farage seems to be dominating the Labour Party conference because it's all they're talking about. You know, he doesn't have to say anything, and he gets more publicity than Keir Starmer gets.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's a bigger feature of the Labour conference and indeed the Lib Dem conference than he was of our own conference, which is quite remarkable. Which shows we are setting the agenda on all these key issues. You've seen the Home Secretary yesterday announcing a very much watered-down plan to deal with ILR, which sounds good in principle. Of course, it's not racist when she says it. It's only racist when we say it.
But that's the weird thing, isn't it? Because
her plan won't tackle those that are already here. It won't tackle the Boris wave, which is where we've come. 3.8 million people have come since the referendum. on current trends, would expect almost 1 million to qualify for ILR and then qualify for benefits.
Yeah.
But Shabana Mahmood's plan won't touch a single one of those.
Because this all started, didn't it, with Keir Starmer's interview on Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg, when he said that he believed that basically Reform's policy on, removing people was racist. But then when he was pressed on it, he said, well, I don't think the people who are voting for Reform are racist. I just think they're frustrated. And you kind of go, well, and people have been putting this to both to him and to other Labour cabinet members since then. Well, if you accuse a party of being racist, how can you say that the people who vote for that party are not racist? You've either got to go the whole hog, which they obviously don't want to do, or you've got to retract the first bit, haven't you?
Yeah, you'd have thought so. But it shows that they've run out of ideas, they run out of steam. All they can resort to is name-calling. And whether it's calling us racist, calling us far-right, calling us divisive, all these things that the Labour cabinet ministers are calling us. Sadiq does it to me as well. Yeah. And it just shows they've got nothing positive to say, whereas we're trying to offer an alternative to the two main parties, something different that people can get behind. And we want to talk about policy. There's enough in politics to discuss about the merits of policy without having to resort to this name-calling. It just looks so childish and pathetic.
It really does. Let's have a look at what Shabana Mahmood said about the price we will pay, I presume she means we collectively, if they fail on the small boats.
When people see small boats arriving on our shores, they see a country that has lost control. When they hear of widespread illegal working, undercutting British workers, they feel the system is rigged. And when they see crime unchecked on unsafe streets, they feel fearful. This was the inheritance that the Conservatives left behind for us, and their current irrelevance is the price that they have paid. So it now falls to us to rise to this challenge. If we do not, our vision of an open, tolerant and generous country will wither. And where we fail, others will succeed.
She's basically saying there that they've inherited this terrible problem from the Tories, who have now disappeared into oblivion, which is true. But she's not actually addressing the fact that they're not stopping the boats. This idea that, this tough woman has come in, she was told, we were told that this was, somebody who meant business. She'd done a great job in justice. I never quite bought that because, in my view, she hadn't done a great job in justice. She hadn't done anything other than let a load of people out of prison who had then committed a load of crime and then had to all go back again. So, her sort of modus operandi, if you like, is questionable at the very least. But she's basically saying that we have to stop the boats without actually having a plan to stop them.
Yeah, well, it's great that she's talking tough, but it's only a start, and it's something that I don't think she'll get the Parliamentary Party behind her, because we know what the Parliamentary Labour Party is like. They wouldn't even reduce an increase in benefit spending, so they're certainly not going to be willing to actually tackle this problem in migration. And, talk tough. Yes, inherited a system in chaos in the Conservatives, but well over 50,000 additional crossings since this government came to power. About 37,000 this year alone. Up 50% on this time last year. The numbers are off the scale. He talks about smashing the gangs. All they're doing are smashing the records. That huge super dinghy yesterday. It's not even a dinghy, it's a boat.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, we can't even call it a small boat, can you? 125 people.
Exactly. And this is where it's heading. And unless we have a real plan to tackle this, unless we have the courage, the political leadership to say there are international agreements that we can no longer be part of, because those are the fundamental stumbling block to stopping this. The ECHR, the Convention on Refugees, we've got to stop that, the Human Rights Act, and put our own tax-paying, law-abiding British citizens first. That's what Reform wants to do, but that's certainly not what Labour will do.
And what can you tell us about, because some of the things that they're accusing Reform of, I think, are slightly disingenuous, and I think they need to be maybe clarified, because they're saying that their sort of mantra is, Reform wants to go after your neighbour, Reform wants to go after your husband or your wife or, your friend or the guy that runs the shop down the road, My understanding of your policy, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you're not going to deport people who are contributing to society. You're not going to deport people who have been living here, quite legally and contributing and paying taxes and working and all of that. You're looking at deporting people who are not doing those things, right?
Exactly. It's primarily about tackling the Boris wave, and it's also primarily about those that want to come here and reside on benefits. If you're going to be working hard, earning a reasonable salary, paying tax, contributing, speaking good English, having a clean criminal record, and contributing to the country, to the economy, to society, then of course you will stay. There will continue to be pathways to citizenship as well. All this is doing is turning ILR into a renewable work visa. So if you're working, if you're contributing, you're very welcome to stay here. And indeed, we need people to come here and contribute and pay tax and pay their way because the country's broke.
Isabel Oakeshott, very good morning to you. Talks International Letter joins us.
Good morning, Mike. Well, I like talking to you, and I also love the word cretin, which I haven't heard for a while, and perfectly sums up so many of the cabinet. I'm still kind of processing everything that happened yesterday. I mean, it was really remarkable in so many ways, wasn't it?
It was.
Keir Starmer's speech was sort of okay. I mean, the most interesting bit of it is what we've been discussing, you know, the absolute fixation with Nigel Farage and his supporters. But what really took that to the stratospheric political level was Nigel Farage's masterful reaction. I mean, bear in mind, he won't have seen Starmer's speech. He had to basically ad-lib that, and it was absolutely pitch perfect, I think, for what he aimed to achieve, which was to steal Starmer's thunder.
Well, I think there's no question that Keir Starmer has made, of all of his political blunders in his career, and certainly since he's become Prime Minister, this is by far and away the biggest, because to call an entire nation of people who vote for a different party to yours racist, which is what he's effectively done, he's more or less handed the election to Reform, hasn't he?
Well, of course, Reform would like to think that and probably felt that yesterday. But, you know, as we come back time and again to the reality that there are 3 years and 9 months till the next election, likely, you know, it doesn't, nothing's a dead cert, is it? I mean, I do find it so hard to imagine that Starmer could possibly lead the Labour Party to what would be certain electoral doom. And yet when you talk to Labour types, the types of people that were in that hall yesterday, they still think the guy is impressive. I mean, these are people who don't get out enough, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I remember Paul Mason on Sunday, because this is where it all started. If I can take you back to Sunday morning's interview with Laura Kuenssberg, when he first, and I think mistakenly and probably without being told to do so, basically answered Laura Kuenssberg's question, you know, do you think Reform's policies on immigration are racist? He said, yes, I think they're racist and immoral. That was the beginning of it, right? Paul Mason, you know, that sort of sometime Labour candidate, sometime economics editor of Channel 4 and the BBC, and sort of general left-wing nutter, came out and went, I thought Keir Starmer was very impressive, fantastic, very strong, answered all the questions. And I'm going, are you watching a different programme? You know, it's absolutely unbelievable.
I think that there's some complete delusion at the top of the party and within the party machine and amongst the type of people that turn up to party conferences. I mean, I think it was Kev said to me yesterday, they're in a blind panic, aren't they? And I thought, no, the problem is they're not in a panic. They think this is all fine and that, you know, that the vast majority of the country is with them. And they think that if they press that button, which bleeps and says racist, then somehow or other that garners huge support. But, you know, you've got to remember when you're a political leader or any prominent politician giving a speech at a venue like that your real audience is not the audience in the room. It's ordinary folk at home who are only going to listen to a clip of it. You know, you got to think, and they sort of know this in their heads. Which are the few seconds of this that are actually going to be played on the radio, on the BBC, on all the other stations? That's all people are going to hear.
Exactly right. Well, let's have a look at some of the things he did say in sort of the calmness of the next day, the morning after. This is him talking about racism.
Our flags flying proudly as we celebrate difference and oppose racism. We can all see that the country faces a choice, a defining choice. Britain stands at a fork in the road. We can choose decency or we can choose division, renewal or decline. A country proud of its values, in control of its future.
Yeah, he talks about values, and yet, as I've said this morning, you know, what sort of values do you have to go after pensioners who want £300 for winter fuel allowance, which is less than half of a taxi fare for a migrant to go and see a doctor in Newcastle from Folkestone? How is that in any way a moral value? What about taking farmers' inheritance tax loophole away so that basically at least one farmer has committed suicide, several are going to lose their livelihoods and their family fortunes over the course of time? You know, in what way is it of moral value to Britain to give away the Chagos Islands and give so much money to Mauritius that they don't have to pay any income tax anymore? You know, the list goes on and on and on. And I find it quite I find it quite objectionable that people like that think that they somehow occupy the moral high ground.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think the values are very questionable of prioritising outsiders, people who we have no idea who they are and what their background is, prioritising their needs over the people of our own nation, who have their heritage in the UK, have made a contribution one way or another, many of them all their lives. You know, I'm thinking about veterans, for example, that are so often to be found sleeping rough on our streets while migrants are in luxury hotels. That is not the kind of values that I would be boasting about. No. And I think this whole suggestion that reform is only negative. I mean, it's so easy to level that critique at a party that is continually highlighting Labour's own failings. It's not that reform doesn't love Britain, that Nigel Farage hates Britain and just is a counsel of despair. It is that reform and Nigel Farage do not like Britain as it is now and want to set it on a different course.
Exactly right, because the course that it's currently on is one which has been made much, much worse by this Labour government. And let's not forget, Keir Starmer has said in the past, in his own words, he prefers Davos to Westminster. You know, he's far more interested in a global agenda and the European Union. He would rather we were part of a European superstate than he is likely to want to have an independent UK. You know, how does that make him a nationalist? It doesn't. It makes him a man who doesn't really care about Britain and its borders. It doesn't really care about its identity, it seems to me.
It makes him a supranationalist. You know, this is somebody who is very, very comfortable among those left-leaning global elite. And, you know, this is Brexit all over again, with a hell of a long build-up. And if you actually think about the parallels with Brexit, you know, the Farage's very old party, it's been through multiple incarnations since it was UKIP. But UKIP was creating merry hell for the then Tory government back in 2013, 2014. That's why David Cameron offered the referendum. The reason I bring this up is I'm just thinking about timeframes here. So there was another 2 or 3 years before there was an actual referendum, and look what happened. So maybe that suggests to us that, you know, reform won't just blow up, it will continue building momentum, and certainly a few more speeches like that from our Prime Minister will only fuel the fire.
Right. And as I've been saying this morning, you know, it's what they say in public gives you some impression of what they're like, but imagine what they must say in private. Have a look at what Shabana Mahmood had to say yesterday about Nigel Farage.
Do you think Nigel Farage is racist?
I think that Nigel Farage is actually almost worse than that. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I think he's being extremely cynical. He knows that with some of the policies he's put forward, which are on indefinite leave to remain, for example, immoral and, in my view, extreme, he is sending that dog whistle to every racist in the land, but he wants to retain some respectability for himself whilst he does it, and that's what we're challenging.
Do you think he is racist himself?
Look, it's for Nigel Farage to explain who and what he is. I'm saying I can see that behaviour. No, I can see. I can see the behaviour that he's indulging in, and I'm calling it out.
So she thinks that it's her, you know, a duty, if you like, to call out his behaviour, which she says is worse than racist. I don't know what worse than racist is in her mind, but she's the Home Secretary of this country.
I mean, don't you cringe at this expression, calling it out?
Yeah, I know.
What is that all about?
Right.
She was quite clearly saying, you know, she didn't want to use the words, and I don't really know why, because she was saying he's worse than that. But I think this just reminds us that this supposedly hard-as-nails Home Secretary doesn't subscribe to the agenda for sorting out our immigration crisis that is being put forward by reform. Even though she's trying to ape it, she's trying to pretend that she's on that side. I just don't really believe she is. I mean, this is somebody who's been on the beaches of, I think it was Lampedusa or somewhere
Greece
like
or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
You know, saying welcome refugees, you poor things. Well, yeah, you know, some of them are poor things, but that is not the kind of attitude that is going to grip our own catastrophe.
No, exactly. And we've seen Lucy Powell in the past, who's about to become the new deputy leader, which is going to put more pressure on Starmer, by the way. So if he thinks he's done all right by getting a few standing ovations in conference, you know, the troubles are going to come his way very soon. Lucy Powell had to resign as a result of some of the things that she said, not least accusing Tim Montgomery of using dog whistle politics when he mentioned grooming gangs. I mean, you know, how about that? I mean, what happened to the AI conversation from Friday? You know, they obviously launched into that because they were worried that that the Morgan McSweeney story is spinning out of control. They were worried about the donkey sanctuary story spinning out of control. They suddenly announced this ID card situation, which wasn't even mentioned in the speech yesterday.
Gone very quiet, hasn't it?
Gone very quiet. He's also, you know, he's gone very quiet on the grooming gangs inquiry, which was meant to be being done. You know, they talk about fairness, but obviously they don't mean fairness to everybody. They mean fairness to the people that they approve of. Lucy Powell said quite openly on a TV programme some months ago that immigrants and illegal migrants have more rights than we do.
Yeah, I remember that. It's all incredibly depressing, isn't it? And I just don't know how much damage is going to be done by these policies in the time that they've got left in power. I don't think a change of Prime Minister will make anything any better. We've got this horrendous budget looming. They're all over the place on some of this stuff. You know, you mentioned ID cards. I'm going to stick my neck out right now, and I actually said it a few days ago. ID cards is not going to happen.
I agree with you. Totally agree.
I'm not aware of any policy that garnered that many, however many million signatures it is, on these Downing Street petitions. I don't know how many we're up to. Do you?
I think it's close to 3 million. I think.
Yeah, I've never known that happen with the policy. I just can't see that they're going to be able to press ahead with that, because what they'll get is mass civil disobedience. Now, you know, I've got my own views on how ID cards can be useful, but I've always said not under this lot. You know, give these people a little bit of power and they just cannot help themselves. They always overreach. Yeah. So that's not going to happen. It seems that putting VAT on private healthcare is not going to happen. I mean, thank God for that. You know, that was. Let's not forget, that was on the front pages of the papers yesterday. Somebody flew that kite, didn't they?
They did.
And quickly pulled the kite back in because it is clearly insane when you've got a struggling NHS to punish people that out of their own pockets pay not to use it. What kind of politics is that?
It's bonkers. I'm going to finish up with my favourite picture of the day today. I don't know if you've seen probably a hard copy of the Daily Mail today, but on pages 8 and 9, if you look closely, there's a picture of Lord Ali, who's back at conference. And if you look closely, he's wearing a pair of blue Adidas shoes with 3 white stripes. And then there's a picture of Keir Starmer with his wife wearing the exact same shoes.
No.
I mean, you could not make this stuff up, right? And he's also holding a dog which has been given to him by somebody else to look like he's holding a dog. So he's got a fake dog, he's got Lord Ali's shoes on, he's wearing the same trousers as Lord Ali, the same jacket, more or less the same shirt as well, same look. I mean, it's like mini-me. What's he doing?
I don't know, but more to the point, what's his wife doing? She looks absolutely lovely, and my God, she's sticking with it, isn't she? I wonder how long that will last. The sacrifices she's having to make, but she played her part and she looked great, and I very much doubt she was wearing anyone else's shoes.
Yeah, I very much doubt it. Although, to be fair, Lord Ali bought some stuff for her as well, didn't he? But we shall see. Zia Yusuf is here. Zia, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good to see you. I was quite gobsmacked, as I think a lot of ordinary British people were yesterday, by the tone of Keir Starmer's speech, by the absolute violent rhetoric that he seemed to be willing to shove out there, and also his complete sort of casual insulting of millions of people in this country.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's not just the Prime Minister. You know, we've seen in the last 48 hours the kind of coordinated, vicious set of demonization and incitement of violence against a single individual in politics, namely our leader, Nigel Farage. that I've seen in my lifetime. I can't remember the last time we've seen that in such a short period of time. Not just the Prime Minister, but a total of 11 cabinet ministers, no less, on pretty much the same day, calling Nigel racist. The Deputy Prime Minister claiming that he flirted with Nazism, namely the Hitler Youth, which, by the way, wasn't even around when Nigel was young. Right. And we've also seen the Prime Minister use language like encouraging his supporters to go into, quote, battle with, quote, the enemy, saying that Nigel represents a threat to our way of life. Again, direct quote. This is language that is clearly designed to incite violence against Nigel. And I also want to share this morning some new information. And I thought long and hard about whether I should share it. I lost some sleep last night thinking about it, but I think it is in the public interest that they know that just about 2 weeks ago, the authorities slashed the size of Nigel's security detail by 75%. The authorities cut Nigel's security detail by 75% 2 weeks ago. That's why so many of us around Nigel are so worried. Now, I want to be clear and reassure people who A, support Nigel, but B, all right-thinking people in this country who believe in sensible democratic politics in this country, that thankfully donors stepped in and have shored up that security, so Nigel is well protected. But the Prime Minister knows exactly what he's doing. This is a Prime Minister who's circling the drain, who, according to a poll this week, is the most unpopular Prime Minister on record. According to a poll this week, the majority of Labour members want to be replaced, and he's lashing out against the man that he knows. Starmer knows he cannot beat Nigel at the ballot box, so he's embarked on the most, I want to say it again, extraordinary, coordinated attacks to incite violence against the man who is the bookmaker's favourite to replace him at number 10 Downing Street. Right. It's disgusting, and he should apologise.
Well, we've played clips this morning, in addition to those that you've mentioned. Shabana Mahmood asked if she thinks that Nigel Farage is a racist. She says she thinks he's worse than that. Don't even know what that means. And also Diane Abbott, who we can forgive because, she comes out with some batty stuff, but she comes out and says, I can see why people want to give him a kicking. This kind of language that if it was, as I said earlier, if it was performed by anybody in reform, there would be calls for people to be kicked out of Parliament, people to be stripped of their jobs. But let me
Mike, the police would be knocking on their door.
Yeah,
the police would be knocking on their door, Mike. And what Diane Abbott said, and I'm unwilling to give her a pass just because she's Diane Abbott, because she went on Newsnight and she said she's, quote, all for giving him a good kicking. And as someone who works with Nigel, has worked with him every single day now for a considerable period of time, seen how much he gives to this country, I have seen psychopaths attempt to attack Nigel, attempt to attack reform supporters, attempt to attack reform activists and volunteers, patriots who love this country. For them to do this, and again, I want to say this isn't just one errant comment. If it was just Diane Abbott or anyone else on Newsnight saying something that then recanted, that's one thing. But a coordinated set of attacks over 48 hours using the biggest megaphone in the country. There's a concept in security circles known as stochastic terrorism. I know that sounds a bit arcane and technical, but I'll try and explain what it is briefly. It's where somebody uses a big megaphone to very publicly demonize and vilify a target, vilify an individual in public in order to whip up and encourage a random act of violence against them. That is a well-known concept in security circles. This comes, by the way, of course, just 2 weeks after the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, the most high-profile political assassination in recent memory. And I just did an interview a minute ago where they asked, well, this isn't an American phenomenon. Well, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. We know full well that there are members of Parliament who have been brutally murdered in cold blood not too long ago in this country, to our country's shame. And so for the Prime Minister to resort to this, I don't care how desperate he is, to resort to this sort of campaign of vilifying, of rhetoric, there's no excuse for it whatsoever. It is coordinated. They've used the biggest megaphone in the country. There's no excuse for it. He needs to apologize. And frankly, if somebody wants to take us on, look, I'm the head of policy. If you want to take issue with our policies, come and debate our policies. Come and debate the issues. But to embark on this coordinated vilification and demonization campaign against a man who, by the way, has so many threats against him. I see every day tweets and TikToks. Just this morning, I was looking, David Bull has just pushed a screenshot out of somebody where there was a tweet saying nothing can stop Nigel now, and some lunatic replied, well, a sniper rifle could. And this happens almost every single day. So I want to reiterate, donors have stepped in to ensure that Nigel is protected and is safe. But this is a new low in British politics.
It really is. Let me just take you back to that removal of his security from the authorities. So who's responsible for that? Who would have made that decision, and how did they communicate it to him?
Well, who made that decision? It remains to be seen. We don't know yet. It's parliamentary security that make that decision. And a couple of weeks ago, they said, inexplicably, in my humble opinion, that they saw fit to materially downgrade. In fact, downgrade is to the tune of 5%. You know, a year ago, Nigel, Reform was polling at around 15%. Today, we're polling at 32%. He's 3 times more likely to be the next Prime Minister. I see the threats against him very specific. Look, no one has done more to champion free speech in this country than Reform and Nigel. We're the only serious political party saying that we want to stand up for free speech. But even the most ardent free speech activist must accept that there is a limit, and does accept that inciting violence against people is unacceptable. I've seen it time and time again. The threat level against Nigel is real. It's off the charts. And what the Prime Minister has done in coordinating, I want to say this again, it's not one, you will not hear me saying this, if it was one errant comment that then got it recanted at a fringe event at a conference. It is the Prime Minister's office. It is 11 cabinet ministers, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, all 2 weeks after the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, and 2 weeks after the authorities decimated the size of Nigel's security detail. Yeah, that is a very, very strange piece of timing, it has to be said. And I mean, as far as the way that, that Nigel Farage can now conduct himself in public, you say luckily there's enough donors to cover the cost of him having his own security to deal with. But basically, you know, we're living in a world now where Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of this country, can stand in front of an audience, a baying kind of crowd of jeering individuals who, for all intents and purposes, to me, look like some kind of mad extremist political rally from the 1970s, right? And he's actually using the words, "We will fight them with everything we have." Now, how is that not some kind of call to arms? That's exactly. In fact, he actually used the word armed. Yeah. He actually used the word armed in his speech. That's another direct quote. And again, anyone who understands security in depth, and we've spoken to security experts about this, there's no doubt he knows exactly what he is doing. Look, I've seen these masked lunatics Antifa, at our events. You know, from what we can tell, it looks like it was an Antifa member or sympathizer who was the assassin of Charlie Kirk. And look, we know extremism does exist in this country. And I want to reiterate, this isn't some fringe political party. This is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, a supposed human rights lawyer, flanked by supposedly great people. And yet they've come out one after the other, 11 no less, to call Nigel racist, to call Reform voters and supporters racist. And as you said, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, said that he's worse than racist. You said, perhaps charitably, you don't know what that means. I know what that means. Well, we know, you know, if somebody is constantly comparing somebody to Nazis, to fascists, again, not debating us on the details of the policy or the merits of the policy, absolutely going after the individual themselves. They know exactly what they are doing. And the fact that this has come, as I said, in the aftermath of the tragic assassination, the most high-profile political assassination in recent memory, in the form of Charlie Kirk. And also, as I said, just a fortnight after the authorities materially downgraded Nigel's security, I'm afraid there's no excuse for it. Keir Starmer needs to apologise. Let's talk to Richard Tice, MP, of course, for Reform, Deputy Leader as well. Richard, very good morning to you.
Well, it's morning. Whether it's a good morning, given everything that's going on, is once again a matter of debate. But isn't it interesting? I mean, Starmer's now, frankly, panicking. He's sort of shuffled off to his favourite place, Brussels. Yeah. Talk with a whole load of bureaucrats about, frankly, not a lot, as he takes cover from the carnage left behind after his, frankly, outrageous speech, when he literally said, words are not enough against Reform, take up arms for action. I mean, if that's not a licence to his nutters, Antifa and the far left to be violent, I don't know what is.
It is really extraordinary that he said those things as the sitting Prime Minister of this country. You know, I said this 2 days ago, Richard. I don't know if you were able to hear what I was doing then. But, you know, for a sitting Prime Minister to be so brazenly threatening and so irresponsible in the encouragement of violence against fellow, Democrats, I find quite astonishing. And I wonder why the police have not actually been knocking on his door and saying, excuse me, you seem to be inciting a bit of violence, Prime Minister.
Well, you're quite right, but of course we know the answer to that because you've got two-tier policing and two-tier justice under two-tier Keir, and they're all in it together, the leaders of these various elements of the establishment, and, frankly, it's terrifying when you've got a Prime Minister calling for his supporters to take up arms. You've got a Deputy Prime Minister lying about Nigel and just a whole load of nonsense and then coming on and having to apologise for it. You've got multiple cabinet ministers, frankly, libelling and slandering Nigel. I mean, it's a very bad place to take a once highly respected democracy. We are heading down the plug hole under this bunch, and it's pretty terrifying, actually.
Isn't it funny, though, that they seem to be playing the Democrats' playbook from 2020 and also from 2024 and also from 2016, where the Democrats in America tried to label Donald Trump as a racist, tried to label Donald Trump as a fascist. I mean, even now they're still doing it, saying, what Donald Trump wants to be is king of America and what he wants to do is stop all elections and not have any more. And they're following that path, even having seen the fact that it backfired spectacularly in America and people who had common sense voted for what they saw was freedom and Donald Trump.
Well, that's right. And obviously, you're seeing with Starmer, he's just lashing out all over the place, utterly desperate. I thought it was interesting that Dan Hodges basically says that was his last conference speech.
Yeah.
That may well turn out to be the case. We are absolutely determined to give an electoral thrashing to Labour at the ballot box next May. And then hopefully that'll be the end of him. What replaces him, who knows? But at the end of the day, we're all getting poorer under this lot. But we are having an influence on certain other areas. There is some good news. The Labour Party now talking about making it harder for dependents to come and join people who've given asylum in this country. That's a good thing, making it, so they say. And then we've also got the Tories, who just a few years ago introduced Net Stupid Zero, now admitting it was a terrible, catastrophic error, and they're going to scrap it. So once again, Reform are leading the way on all these policies, and that's the optimism that your good listeners and viewers need to take away this morning, Mike.
Yeah, and they do take it away, and they love it, and they love the fact that there are very few places where they can hear the likes of yourself talking, without being interrupted, talking without being contradicted, talking without being questioned and kind of vilified and pilloried as if you're some kind of maniac, because the normal people of this country agree with much of what you say. And a very disturbing story this morning in the Telegraph, written by Gordon Rayner, a very important guy there at the Telegraph, associate editor, saying the Labour Party is facing questions now over alleged payments to journalists and influencers to post social media content that criticises Reform UK. I mean, if you didn't know what you know and what I know about the way the media works in this country, you'd be staggered. I'm actually not staggered this is going on. I'm sure it is going on.
Well, that's the sort of thing that you hear about going on in an authoritarian dictatorship like Russia or North Korea. So, whether or not that's where Starmer is taking things, I don't know. All I can say is that, when I'm in my constituency yesterday, at a residence home, and I have sort of 85-year-old residents fuming about the fact that, social care is costing them or their loved ones an absolute fortune, tens of thousands a year, whilst we're sort of taking hundreds and hundreds of illegal migrants across the channel, costing £40,000-50,000 a year, and that's where they see their taxes going. And it's pretty sobering stuff, I have to say, when you hear it sort of portrayed like that. That essentially the care and provision for our elderly and vulnerable in our constituencies is being prejudiced by the cost we're spending on these illegal migrants.
Right. Well, isn't it funny that, you know, until he was elected Prime Minister, Keir Starmer spent most of his life complaining that Britain was broken, basically, and he now, excuse me, and he now says that it's down to you that Britain is broken because you keep saying it. Well, this is what he used to say a little over a year ago.
I mean, look, we've got to be optimistic. They're starting to talk our language on visas, on indefinite leave to remain. So, in reality, they won't actually do anything about it. But we are changing the narrative. And I think that's why, actually, we're going up and up in the polls, and we will continue to do so because people won't forgive, they won't forget what the Tories and Labour have done to this country. And the quantity of people saying to me, how can we get an earlier election is truly remarkable. And how this lot survived for another 3 3/4 years. I suppose that's another hope of optimism. People say it's another 4 years. Actually, it's not. I'm counting every month down. It's 3 3/4, Mike. Yes. We need to take some hope.
Well, this is it. I worked out the other day they're actually 25% into their period of supposed occupation of Downing Street. As you know, I've been saying for a long time, I don't think they'll make it. I don't think they'll last that long. Certainly Keir Starmer won't. What about this? Talking of net stupid zero, as you call it, front page of the Times today, Britain blows £1 billion on turning off turbines during high winds. So we spent £1 billion this year alone to not actually get any power from these wind turbines. What the hell is going on?
Oh, and by the end of the year, it'll be way more than that. And even the eco-zealot lovers and various government departments admit that the cost of these, what they call constraint payments or balancing payments to pay the operators to turn this very old technology. I mean, these wind turbines, I mean, it's 300-year-old technology, for heaven's sake. You know, it's not exactly cutting edge. And yeah, these constraint payments are going to be billions and billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash. It's an outrage. And then you've got that Red Ed Miliband, bless him, ridiculously saying that he's going to ban the extraction of shale gas. This is literally our energy treasure that we all own under our feet, that gives us competitive low energy prices, and he wants to stop it. I mean, the guy is he's an economic vandal.
Yeah.
He really is. And he's destroying hundreds of thousands of jobs up and down the country. And it's an absolute disgrace. Just in Lincolnshire alone, we've got the Lindsey oil refinery that's in receivership. And his ideology means that he's trying to prevent a sale to bidders who want to buy the whole site, thousands of jobs at risk. I mean, you know, we're battling every day against this complete madness.
Yeah, it is madness. And, you know, you'll have seen him yesterday having to go at Elon Musk. You'll have seen him doing this weird sort of catwalk video up and down on the promenade at Liverpool. You've seen him with his ukulele. You've seen him talking absolute and utter rubbish. You've seen Jürgen Meyer.
What was this clip all about? I mean, what is he doing here?
I've no idea what he's doing. He's trying to appeal to young people, right? Because he thinks that if he does this on TikTok, because they've all got these ridiculous advisors who go, this is how you get in touch with the young. You know, I don't know anybody who thinks Ed Miliband is not a complete plonker, right, who's under the age of about 20. They all think he's an idiot. And by the way, everybody over the age of 20 thinks he's an idiot as well. You know, the guy needs to sit down and shut up. But this is what tells you about the Labour government. The vast majority of people in the Labour Party think he's the next leader. They think he's the future.
Actually, to be candid, I mean, I think our poll rating would soar even more if he becomes the leader.
I know.
But here he is. For those not actually watching but listening, there's this video of Miliband sort of prancing up to a camera.
I'd say mincing more than prancing.
Mincing, okay, mincing up to the camera, thrusting out one hip in front of the other. Some very strange look. I mean, God forbid you might actually see him in a dance floor in a nightclub. I mean, the place would evacuate immediately.
I know. It's really quite terrifying. I'm gonna give you a little gift just before you go. This is Beth Rigby, who I'm not a massive fan of, nailing Keir Starmer yesterday when he was out trying to sort of cover up the massive mistake he made by attacking Nigel Farage. And she gets him here on whether or not he thinks Donald Trump might be racist. Have a look.
Donald Trump said under Sadiq Khan, London is being driven towards Sharia law, is it?
No, of course it's not.
Okay.
That's nonsense.
Isn't it that racist as well?
Well, it's nonsense.
Isn't it racist to accuse a Muslim mayor of driving London to Sharia law?
I'm not going to start down the road of discussing whether things said by others are racist or not.
Well, you just discussed Nigel Farage having a racist policy, so you literally are discussing that.
I have been...
I mean, the guy's so stupid.
Actually, all credit to Beth.
Yeah.
She did well there, cornering him and exposing his absolute hypocrisy and frankly lies. I mean, the guy is just, he will say anything to anybody at the turn of a moment. And this is our Prime Minister. I mean, it's serious.
Well, yesterday he goes out, right, to justify what he said about Nigel Farage and about immigration. And he told more lies about the Dublin Convention, where he made out that, you know, it was Nigel Farage who made us leave the European Union, which is why we've got these boats coming. He called them the Nigel Farage boats. I mean, a complete and utter barefaced untruth that he told, where he said that when the Dublin Convention was in place, we were able to send more people back. Absolute cobblers.
And his complete cobblers, another blatant lie. I reminded myself of the data. In 2016, 17, 18, under the Dublin Convention, wow, we were able to send back to the EU a few hundred, but they sent to us sometimes double or treble that number. And
well,
we were only
sometimes 6 times. It was like 1,200 one year.
Right, in 1 year. I mean, it's just, you know, this man is he is a dangerous liar. And a threat to our democracy, the way he's behaving. He's not fit to be Prime Minister, and the sooner he's gone, the better. And then we can have a laugh at Mr. Miliband mincing his way into Downing Street.
Yeah, well, the next chapter will then begin. Listen, Richard, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Let's talk now to Rupert Bell, Talks Royal Correspondent, because on the front page of the Telegraph today, in amongst of all of the horror and the ghastly stories about what happened up in Manchester yesterday, the Prince of Wales has given an interview and has said he is not afraid to question tradition to make sure the monarchy remains fit for purpose. In other times, this would be absolutely, you know, front and centre of every newspaper, but obviously because of what happened yesterday, it's been demoted slightly. But let's find out from Rupert what Prince William means. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, I mean, obviously a very sad day today as we take account of what happened in Manchester outside the synagogue yesterday. But this is quite a significant interview that Prince William has done. He's done a documentary, I think, with a guy called Eugene Levy.
Yeah, Eugene Levy runs, well, he's a very successful actor, comedian, part of a series called Schitt's Creek. I hope I pronounced it right. Yeah. And then he's got a docu-travel series called The Reluctant Traveller. And within this programme, Prince William has given a very laid-back interview, sort of chewing the fat, basically, with him about life. And part of it is, how does he see the future role of the monarchy? And
look at some of the things he says. This is him talking about his grandmother.
Your grandmother? She had horses here as well, as you can imagine, was a big deal for her.
He's obviously missing his extended family. He was very close to the Queen, Elizabeth II, and of course Prince Philip as well. And he also says something about his family can sometimes overwhelm him. Is he talking about Harry there, do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot going on. I mean, he's not only his father and wife's diagnosis of cancer, and he described 2024 as the hardest year of his life. I think it basically reflects the whole nature. There's a lot of family problems for him, and one of the big problems for him is where's his support network when his generation of royal sort of supporters, whereas the king has obviously got his sister, he's got the Duke of Edinburgh, and he's got others around him, and obviously his son. So that's the big problem for him. He does feel that when the older generation go, he's going to be ploughing a lone furrow, and I think that's part of what may be overwhelming him. There's also, the Harry and the Andrew issues are all something that add to the sort of worries for not only him, but for his father as well. So it's not a straightforward job. So I think he is a cerebral man. And
I presume there's a final clip here of him arriving on a scooter to see Mr. Levy. Prince William on a scooter. So when are we seeing this, Rupert?
Well, you can see it. It's on one of the streaming networks.
Okay.
So that's why I think it's Apple Plus. I think, but I mean, this is so that's where you can see it. But I think Graham would have been given a final say-so and approval back home here, just to make sure that there's no foot in mouth moments. But I think it was William's very guarded and very sensible, and never actually tries to say anything that would put him in hot water.
No, indeed. Let's talk to Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary, who joins us now from College Green down in Westminster. Robert, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for being here. It's a very sad day, obviously, but in some ways people are saying to me this morning an inevitable day, given the way that this country has been going in the past recent few months and maybe the last 2 years since the October 7th attacks in Israel, because this government has allowed, and maybe even the previous government, allowed these protests to go ahead without any kind of fear of reprehensible punishment of any kind, without any fear of being arrested for chanting ghastly anti-Semitic chants.
Well, look, these were gut-wrenching attacks by this absolutely vile animal, this monster in Manchester. And my heart goes out to the victims, their families, and the community in North Manchester, as well as British Jews across the country who today will be feeling lonely and fearful. And we've got to say to our fellow British citizens, British Jews, that they are not alone, that we're going to stand with them. But you're right to say that it's not just about fine words, it's about action. We've got to root out anti-Semitism and extremism, and let's be frank, Islamist extremism, wherever we see it. And that has been allowed to grow and grow among us in recent years, particularly after October the 7th, as that means zero tolerance on it. Make sure that when the police see people valorizing Hamas or Hezbollah on the streets, arrest them. Make sure that you can't shout jihad in London and get away with it. Ensure that if people are here on visas who are displaying, frankly, anti-British sentiment, that they are deported, removed from this country, never to return. And that each and every one of our institutions, universities, the NHS, charities, where we're seeing anti-Semitism and extremism, actually take action now, root it out, because this is anti-British. We cannot allow this in our country.
I mean, we've got NHS doctors, Robert, who are quite happy to be seen on social media, making the sign of the slit throat at Palestinian protests, and yet they still work in the NHS. We've got Shabara Mahmood this morning telling everybody who asks her that she's powerless to ban the Palestine Action protest this weekend. Well, how is she powerless? She's the Home Secretary. Palestine Action is already a prescribed organisation. How can she not stop it?
Well, a prescribed organisation should not be organising rallies on the streets of our country. There are powers to take action and ensure that never happens again. And look, these protests that are planned for this weekend, I would just send this message to the people who are organising them. For goodness sake, show some basic human decency.
Yeah.
Allow issues to grieve this weekend without fear or worry. Be normal human beings and just think about your fellow British citizens for once.
But hear about this, right? Yesterday evening, the Metropolitan Police put out a statement confirming that the same marchers who are about to march around this weekend had just violated the Public Order Act. They'd assaulted police officers, created major disruption and precipitated 40 arrests. I haven't heard from Keir Starmer today talking about these awful people attacking the police like he does any time it happens when there's a march that he doesn't agree with. Where's Keir Starmer today?
Yeah, I thought what happened last night was disgusting. So disrespectful that you had people out on the streets in Manchester, for goodness sake, and other cities across this country. They should have stayed at home. It was totally disrespectful. And in London, you saw it straying into violence and disorder, dozens of arrests being made by the Metropolitan Police. That's a total disgrace. Yes, politicians, including the Prime Minister, should call those individuals out. And the point you made a moment ago about that doctor, that really does need to be restated. I mean, there was a doctor last week where the NHS allowed her to continue to practice, despite the fact that she had said that the Royal Free Hospital, a hospital in London, was a cesspit for Jewish supremacy. And she had said that she refuses to condemn Hamas for the October the 7th attacks. Well, that woman should be sacked on the spot, no questions asked. And the fact that supposed senior leaders in the NHS chose to turn a blind eye to that, I mean, that's shameful. It really is shameful. Every institution in our country needs to step up now and take a long, hard look in the mirror about how they are treating these individuals, these extremists in our midst.
And at the end of the day, Robert, we have got this problem in this country because I'm afraid an awful lot of people from the Middle East are now living here. And these are the people who are perpetrating an awful lot of this violence against the police. I know there are left-wing sort of agitators as well who are homegrown. But there's an awful lot of people who are pro-Palestine on these marches who are from countries in the Middle East who have now come to live here and who are basically fighting out their own internecine wars on the streets of Great Britain. You know, the Israeli Foreign Affairs Minister Gideon Saar quoted this morning in the Telegraph saying the truth must be told, blatant and rampant anti-Semitic and anti-Israel incitement as well as calls of support for terror have recently become a widespread phenomenon in the streets of London, in cities across Britain and on its campuses. He's absolutely right.
Look, we should be honest about what's happening in this country. There is a minority of Islamist extremists who are posing a very serious risk to the public. Look at almost all the incidents that have happened, the terrorist incidents over the last 25 years. Almost all of them have been Islamist extremists. Look at the caseload of MI5, our security service. It's 80% Islamist extremism. Let's have an honest debate about what's going on and then take action. Make sure the Home Office programmes like Prevent, which are supposed to be bearing down on this, are as robust as possible. Deport the people that we can who have these anti-British sentiments. Get them out of our country. Make sure the police are arresting people who are valorising Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, Palestine action on the streets of this country. That is what we've got to ensure. And yes, when it comes to immigration, we should be honest that we have imported people into our country over the last 25 years, many of whom are from countries that have, frankly, medieval attitudes, attitudes towards women and girls, and yes, where it is prevalent, anti-Semitism. And that is wrong. We've got to therefore have a different immigration system that puts the safety of the British public, whether it's British Jews or anyone else, first, second and last.
Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more.